John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Hell Talk. Today, me and my co-host Hoku
Hi, everybody.
are going to be discussing Hellblazer issues 101 through 109, which we just got through. And this was like an interesting set of issues. I think this is the most broken up story-wise bunch of issues that we've ever read in Hellblazer. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, this was like the least cohesive storyline collection that we've come across so far, for sure.
Yeah, normally there's like, 1-6 arc and maybe like one shot and then maybe like a 2 or 3 issue arc as well. Like it's weird to have a one shot, a 3 issue arc, another one shot, a 2 issue arc, another one shot, like it's just so weird to have it broken up like that. I didn't hate it or anything. It was fun. But it definitely made it like, all right, like what happened in the last issue is just one issue. It wasn't like a whole long story. So, do you have any what'd you feel about that? Did you have issues with it at all?
No, I mean, I think the individual issues and the shorter story arcs definitely lend themselves more to a month-to-month feel, which is how this originally came out. I suppose the only difference is when you can read them in like as a collection or in a row, it feels more jarring than a whole storyline that you read 6 issues together or 2-3 issue compilations like right next to each other. So I think it lends itself to a month-to-month basis sort of reading, but when you read them all at once, it's a little jarring, it's a little chaotic, and it feels almost like, where's the story? Like, what, this is like individual moments happening, but where's the meat of the story I'm supposed to be like getting into?
Yeah, I found it like mostly, I mean, obviously like sometimes the one shots are just there to like palate cleanse from the past arc or whatever, but like to have them kind of be one shots and not have some kind of plot that he obviously is finding in it in like the background, kind of like Buffy episodes or something, or like a TV show that has an overarching plot, like, oh, we're gonna fight the big bad, we don't know who it is, and then in between those like key issues or key episodes, there's like the fun episodes, but then there's something that ties in slightly to that.
Yeah, it definitely had more of a monster of a week sort of feel to it, although I guess in this case it was more of a what thing is John going to try to fix this time feeling.
Yeah, I think if they had kind of like set up what the, we'll say, big bad was going to be after these 9 issues a little bit more clearly, it would have been like, oh, I see what they're doing, like earlier for sure. I only said in my mind, I was like, oh, I get it, like by the last issue of this little section. So, but I enjoyed each of the stories as they were on their own, like I thought they were fun. Kind of, some of them are super fucked up. Some of them were just like, what is going on? And that's like, the first issue of this, which is 101, like really kicks off that feeling of like, what's going on? Is like John has to join his friends at a football game.
Yeah, as not a big sports fan of any kind, this was probably my least engaging issue. Just because I was like, oh, he's going to a football match. Cool.
Yeah, well, John also doesn't care about sports, so
It's very much in his spirit in this issue for sure.
Yeah, you were like, I also don't care about what's going on.
100%.
It's just kind of like a one-off of I guess to show, okay, so when I look back on these, at the time of first reading them, I was like, I don't know why that was there. But now that I kind of know what's going to happen after I've read the next arc, I'm like, oh, I see. Like, okay, I think this is showing like John, he can still do magic and stuff. Like he spots the demon, he understands what's going on. But as he faces this demon that's at the football game that's going to cause chaos or whatever, it's like he says in his mind, like, I know I would not be able to like beat him or like do anything, which is not very John. I mean, John might say that, but he's always got like a trick up his sleeve, which I think is what they're hinting at for the next arc that happens in 102 and 104. But like it is a setup, but if you don't know that they're going to set it up, like if you haven't read, excuse me, if you haven't read issues 102 to 104 and know that, then it's kind of like, huh, what's this about?
Yeah, it has that feeling of like he's not really sure of himself, and we're not used to that kind of John. He kind of came out of the last arc feeling like he was on top, like I've kind of got a handle on things, especially after his whole, dream slash not a dream, like crazy stuff in that house confronting his dad and the first and everything. So you think he's like coming out of this like I've better grasp on things now. Like I feel like I'm solidly myself again. But at the same time, he's also like, I don't know if I could actually take this guy on, and that's kind of scary. So it was a new headspace for John to be in and for us to be there with him. So it was a little weird. It was a little jarring, like, oh, is John like not up to being John anymore? Like what's gonna happen with him?
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like and also I think there was a point where like the guys are getting ready and he's just kind of like standing there like, I feel not myself. Like I'm not present or whatever, you know? And I thought that was just from the football of it, but it could have been like he's in some kind of like melancholy because he doesn't feel the same. Um, but like I said, directly after this, they kind of explain this setup in 101, which is the story arc called The Difficult Beginnings or Difficult Beginnings, which is the story of John getting his groove back, we'll say. How John Constantine got his groove back.
Oh yeah. We're going on a little journey with John.
Like literally, this is this is that story arc. So like, and this is again, Jenkins does this thing sometimes where like he's not straightforward with the storyline. So you're kind of like with John on this journey as you're trying to figure out as the reader, like, wait, what is going on? What does this have to do? What is this underlying story I'm supposed to be following? Because the first two issues of this were pretty, for me, they were pretty like not concrete as to what exactly John's doing. And then by the end of it, I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, or by the end of the second issue, I was like, oh yeah, I get it. So by issues 102 and 103, I was like a little confused. By the end of 103, I was like, oh, okay. And then 104 was fully explained. But like, as I was reading these, like it starts off with, this play of like a legend, I guess you'd say, of like, these, the yin and yang, like the darkness and light, the brothers are good and evil and they're fighting each other. And, one of them wins and that would be the goodness wins and he kills his evil brother. But then like he finds himself listless and stuff later on, because you can't have like what is good without evil to compare it to kind of thing. And so it took me a minute to figure out what exactly, I mean, it seems obvious now because I know it, but like it took me a minute to figure out exactly what like the point of that story was. Did you have any issues following any of that?
I mean, I was just kind of going along with it, sort of the way when John was talking to the weird guy in the woods and he was telling a story about the fox and his, animal friends. I figured it was something along that line of just like, here's the story, except no one's telling it and it's just being told to us and we don't really know where it fits in his life. I assumed that it was sort of like the journey he was going on now was what the story was supposed to be portraying. But like you said, at the end of it, he beats his darker self, the brother. So he's not really beating anyone right now. He has beaten his darker self already by casting bad John into hell. So then it's like, oh wait, no. So I suppose that's sort of like a prequel story to catch us up to where he is now. That's how he was thinking back then, and this is where he is now. So yeah, it was a little bit of a disconnect with it being like sort of a past story, but being told in the present, but not actually being told by anyone. It just sort of being there.
Right. It's just
as
happening.
He's going along on his journey. Yeah. So it was a little weird and interesting way to sort of catch us up in case we weren't quite sure what was going on. It didn't really seem to explain it necessarily, but it did explain it at the same point once you figured out what it was. So yeah, it was all right.
Yeah. One thing about this little section is that it reveals some stuff about his history in Ravenscar, which is the name of the asylum that he's, was taken to after Newcastle. We only know that name, but we never really knew what happened. So one thing I like about this arc is that, and actually this section has some like interesting, not like issues 101 to 109 has some interesting add-ons to John's like history and stuff. And one of those is this Ravenscar revealed exactly what happened to him, at least somewhat during Ravenscar. I mean, we kind of assumed he had a hard time in the mental institution, but like, I mean, did you think it was as bad as it was, or he's getting like beaten and possibly sexually assaulted?
I've seen Girl Interrupted. I figured it was not a pleasant experience for him, considering he forcibly or did he self commit himself?
I I think he was forcible. Well, actually, I don't know. I think he did. I think he self committed himself because he was like, um, I need to pay for what I did. But I don't think he thought it was going to be that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think he deserved any like horrible treatment or, possibly being sexually assaulted or anything. That's definitely not what a place like that is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about helping people with, mental issues get better so that they can reintroduce themselves into society. So, I mean, but, from various movies and things about how mental institutions are portrayed, you kind of figure he's going to go through some sort of horrible ordeal while he's there, even though he's supposed to be getting better. Um, so I expected it to not necessarily be a positive experience, but yeah, I had no idea like how far they were going to go as far as like what they're going to say he has been through. So that was a bit of a shock
Yeah,
and a surprise.
has there ever been a movie or a book or TV show where a mental institution is portrayed in a good light? And then also, has there ever been a mental institution that did anything good? That like those kind, the kind where you get like committed and you can't leave. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I have honestly, I don't think it would make for a good story because there'd be no drama if someone actually went in there, got the help they needed, and left. So probably not. I would say that it wouldn't be a good story. Like no one's going to write about how, oh, I went to this place and they helped me and I got better and there was absolutely no drama or anything and I'm good now.
well, there could still be drama, but like the drama could be like, oh, this place is good, but I don't want to be healed or something. You know what I mean? Or I don't know. I'm just thinking because like
Yeah,
I
it's
can't
always the
think of anything.
negatives. It's always the darkness. It's always the, oh, this place was horrible and completely like wrecked my soul and myself physically. And that's why I'm telling the story. So, yeah, I don't know about anyone who has ever portrayed it in a positive way,
Yeah, I
personally.
can't think of one at all.
Could be out there. You have to look for
Possibly, if
it.
anyone knows, shoot it our way. We like some media that might not be all tropey about asylums, but I mean, I can. The reason why I assume they're all like that is because all asylums are fucking terrible. So you know, um, especially from the point of view of the patients, I would think. You're just
Yeah,
locked in there.
not exactly a place where you go to. I mean, it's not like what are those called, like the detox facilities where they're all like fancy spas and oh, let us help you heal your
Well, those are
traumas through
private
like
ones, yeah.
exactly like through like hot tubs and massages and stuff. I don't really think that they offer that to just any person who is going through mental traumas and doesn't necessarily have a ton of money. So yeah, I'm not surprised if they aren't positive experiences.
Yeah, you're probably right. That makes sense. But yeah, so we get two stories. The first one is like John kind of going to Ravenscar. The second one is John going to this village where he knows there's a serial killer here. He knows who he is, and he's like, I want to talk to you. I want to learn about evil, kind of thing. So that's why he does that. And then I guess that fails, right? Because then he goes in the third issue of this arc, he goes to meet Ellie in hell, who is in hiding because the First the Fallen has returned.
Well, he meets himself first, right? Like it's almost like he called on himself to be like, "Hey, how's it going, bud? This was a kind of a bad idea. How about we get back together, you and me?
Right,
Just
he's like
wipe the
desperate.
slate clean, start over." Yeah.
Yeah, when he doesn't learn what he wants from Ravenscar and the serial killer, he does meet his evil self who I'm not quite sure if it's actually his evil self or just in his mind, because his evil self is in hell.
But he also goes to hell to meet Ellie. So, I mean,
That's true. They don't explain that really.
not really. Again, none of those things that's kind of unclear. Kind of like the whole dream sequence with, the first, and the first is like, is this real or is this a dream? It's all in your head. Or is it not? So yeah, that was probably another example of like, is he actually talking with his evil self? But I want to believe that it was real because the way you were describing his evil self seems to be like he's really like enjoying his time in hell. He's kind of becoming part of the aesthetic, I guess you could say, where he's getting kind of creepier and a bit more on like his bad self is really coming into his own down there. He's got, like you said, long nails and looking kind of more haggard and stuff. So whether he's just being tortured or is becoming maybe more on the side of being a torturer, uh it seemed like that sort of a progression. I don't know if that's just John thinking this is what would happen to me in hell, or if that was actually what was happening to his other self. But I tend to lean more towards it's actually happening,
I do
because
too.
of the whole he also sees Ellie too. So
Yeah, I do too, only because it wouldn't mean anything to him if it was just in his imagination and he knew it, right? Like, it seems like these meeting places, like the I Ching little symbols that he's going to, the places that they represent are actual like places. Like each of the other stories, it was like Ravenscar where the lightning was, and then it was like the water was where this serial killer fisherman was, and then the mountain or earth is where he meets his his evil self. So it's kind of like, I guess it would have to be real for it to actually mean something. He just comes out of nowhere though. I guess he escaped, or he, by the time, I think he said this, sometimes it's hard for me to remember exact details. So if I get it wrong, please correct me in the show notes or whatever, in the comments below. But, is it because his evil self, is now part of hell and like is hanging out and torturing and stuff and all in it, and now he can like go and as he pleases, or am I misremembering that?
maybe because it's like technically still his soul, he could almost summon him in a way. Even if he was still being tortured, he could almost like call to him and pull him, or like meet him halfway. Maybe they were meeting in some sort of like a limbo space of like, I'm pulling you from hell, I'm moving from earth to this place, and we're having this little like meet up chat to be like,
Yeah,
hey,
because the mountain, it's not like John climbed a mountain.
yeah. So maybe the mountain represents just like the meeting space and them meeting in something.
That must be it, but he didn't explain it, and I honestly didn't even think about it until just now. So
Always up for interpretation, it seems sometimes, where he doesn't specifically lay something out. You kind of have to be like, so maybe it means this, possibly.
yeah, that's fun. I kind of like it when like I'll say plot holes, but I'm not sure if they're quite that. But like when those things don't matter at all because you're so like either in the story or your mind's trying to figure out the story, where it's going and all that, it overlooks some inconsistencies that might be there. I don't even know if they are there or not still. So because like you said, he goes to hell. I mean, we've never seen John walk into hell, but maybe Ellie is hiding in some kind of dimension as well, and it's not quite hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so like maybe he pulled his evil self to some sort of like pocket limbo, and then he's also meeting her somewhere on the outskirts of hell. So he's not in hell proper. He's in like a further precinct or something.
Yeah, because it is like a cave. It's like literally represented as a cave. So it's like, maybe it is some kind of like thing that she's hiding in, because maybe she can't hide in hell proper because
Yeah, then he could find her.
yeah. So they don't explain that though. All we know is that John, after he talks to his evil self, is like, fuck, he won't rejoin me. But I need to get some bad in me. So he comes
Time
up with
for
a plot.
plan D.
Yeah, literally. And I think John enjoyed this plan most of all. I think, he never thought he'd have this plan, but he always really hoped. That's that's how I feel about it. But
It was always in the back of his mind that this could go this way, and he was down for it, apparently. Totally down for it. Fully committed to seeing this plan through no matter what it took. And apparently it didn't take very much.
yes. So we won't bury the lead. Basically, John finds Ellie and decides like he's like, well, I know an evil person, that's Ellie, even though she's like a good demon, she's still a demon, and he's like, I know how to take some evil out of her, and that is to seduce her. And they don't explain how he does it, but after having sex with her, he has taken a little something from her, and and made himself evil again a little bit, just tainted it just a little gray, in there.
I
So.
hope that he at least gave her something in return.
Oh, he gave her something. Yeah, okay. So first off, before we get to the end of that, like, what did you think of the Ellie story?
I was surprised to see her again. She kind of just popped up before earlier, where she's just like, dude, John, what the hell? Like, I thought we had a deal. And he was just like, oh, yeah, my bad. Sorry about that. And then, she disappears again, pretty much. So I wasn't sure if that was going to be her only sort of like, hey, I'm still here. Don't forget about me. So it was nice to see her again. But then, I'm torn because part of me does feel bad for her being used by John when they seem to have had such a relationship of semi-trust of like, hey, this is what's going to happen. Are you on board with this? Yes, I'm totally on board with this. They've done so much together. It kind of felt like they had sort of like, equal standing as far as like respect for each other. And this was just sort of his way of being like, totally John, of like, there's something I need and I'm going to get it by any means possible, no matter what I have to do. So in this way, I think he was even more ruthless than her, and she's a demon. So you got to give him props for that.
For sure.
Do kind of feel a tiny bit sorry for her, but she is also a demon and not necessarily I mean, you said she's a good demon, but is she really? She's just someone that John has used to his advantage when he's needed her, and she has also been on the same side of like, yes, I will help you with this because it also benefits me. So in that way, like, yeah, he was between the two of them, he was the first to screw her over, not once but twice. Once, like, spiritually, but bringing back the first, and then the second physically, so he was the antagonist in this situation and in this relationship. So yeah, feel bad for her a little bit, but again, she is a demon and she should have seen it coming. Really, it's he's John. Obviously, he was going to find a way to get what he wanted by whatever means necessary. I can't believe she fell for his sob story.
Yeah, she knows he's a bastard. So, I mean, did you think John had the skills to seduce a succubus?
I honestly did not. That was a surprise. I thought she would have like figured it out, like right away, been like, "What's your angle, dude? Like, you don't. What is this? What are you trying to do? What is it that you need?" And if he had maybe like told her instead of just like, maybe, I don't know, maybe he had to seduce her because that in itself was an act of evil that he then needed to get the evil from her, instead of just being like, hey, I have a proposition for you, I need this from you, and I'll owe you something. And maybe he didn't want to go through that. So, but I don't know, I mean, the way he went about it was definitely shady. Maybe that was part of what he needed. But yeah, no, I didn't think he had it in him, honestly. But obviously that shows how much she was willing to trust him, which is also kind of sad.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe, and I didn't think about this until just now. So he's good John now, right? So maybe she can see like your intentions and stuff, or read people better when they are, when they have an evilness in them. But since John is all good at the moment, like maybe she's fooled because he has, he's kind of blinding her with his goodness that is there, even though he still has, thoughts that might be evil, but like in his soul, he is pure right now, right? So
that is also a good point. There could be something to that, because she does seem to be almost be able to read people to know, like when they were tricking Gabriel and stuff, she's like, oh yeah, I knew when I like the flowers thing was totally going to get him. Like, she read him like point by point of like how to get him to do what she wanted. So yeah, that is an interesting thought too, that maybe she couldn't read him. She could not see his intention. So if he's just like, I've always been in love with you, let's do it. And she's just like, wow, okay.
Yeah, or she
I
did
am
reason
kind of
his
lonely.
intention, and it was, it read all good,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting. I mean, that wasn't explicit in the text, I don't think, but like it makes sense if you think about everything that why she would be seduced, like why this could happen. Um, but yeah, I
There's
mean,
a lot you can read into the situation, honestly, like how we kind of come at it from different angles as far as like how you read him, how you read her, between the two of them. This So it's almost like he kind of left it open to interpretation, which he seems to like to do without there being like a laying out of John being like, and so I, after, after they do it, and then he's like, aha, see, I was able to do this to like seduce you. And this was my plan all along. There is no like explanation that way. It's just sort of like, you have to read how the scene has been described, what they've said, how they do it, what's in his head, and then make your assumptions from there as far as like how it went about.
yeah, I mean, I think he likes to do that. It definitely makes the reader have to kind of be on their toes. But when like we're discussing it like we are now, I'm like, oh, that's a thing. That's a thing. Like there's little things that like awaken that my mind puts together. Things click into place as we discuss it. So I can't tell if that's a fault or if that's a what do they say? If that's a feature or a bug, like of his writing style, at least in this section.
I do like that it's kind of open like that, because sometimes you don't mind a little hand holding as far as someone who's like, explains how things are going on, what's going to happen, why it's happening. That's nice sometimes, but at other times you kind of just want to be along for the ride and let the story reveal itself, and then you can kind of pick it apart and guess, which is also fun because everyone can come at it from a different angle.
Yeah, I think it was fun overall, and it was fun to see. I mean, especially you got to see like Ellie's demon form when she's like, "You betrayed me!" Like she gets all fucking like demoned out. So I thought that was pretty sick.
It's a good thing he didn't have to seduce her like that. That might have been a little rougher.
That would have been funny if he did. That might have been funnier.
Yes, your scales are so
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that one was hard to figure out how to describe too. That whole like double page spread of them double page spreading. Um, um, they like John is calling her like whore and stuff, and I'm like, okay, like how do I explain this? He's telling a demon in her love language. That's what she wants to hear. That's hot to her.
whispering sweet nothings into her ear. They just happen to be words that most women don't want to hear because she's a demon. I guess she likes that sort of
Right.
degradation.
It makes sense,
It's
I
raw.
guess. Yeah.
Sure.
It's what? Hey, who am I to kink shame a succubus?
Exactly.
She's into weird things, but that's fine.
You're down for that. It's
Yeah.
all positive experiences until it's not.
Exactly. Until it's not. Exactly. Until you accidentally cross a line you didn't know, and then you get yelled at for saying something you shouldn't have. So,
Or in this
anyway,
case, admitting, hey, thanks, babe, for all that like evil. I'm gonna bounce now.
right. How do you think he extracted the evil from her, or was it just the act of seducing the succubus that was that?
I don't know. There could be a lot of ways that you could say he extracted the evil from her. What tools he used.
Yeah, let's not get too graphic, I guess. So, I walked into that landmine, I think.
Yeah. Don't know how explicit you want this show
no,
to
it's
be.
fine. I was gonna say, like we don't need to know the birds and the bees of it, but then I thought, well, would it be birds and the bees, or would it be like
Fangs in the teeth.
yeah, demon and I don't know,
Fangs in the
angels or
horns.
whatever. With Ellie, that makes sense. The demons and the angels of it, right? Because
Yeah, there you go.
she did fucking angel. So, anyway, yeah. So at the end of that, John has his mojo back. And I didn't think about it until I said, like, John gets his groove back. But it's literally like, isn't that the plot of that old movie? I say old, but it's from like the 90s.
I've never seen it.
Oh,
I
you
know
never
the
saw
gist
Stella
of it,
got a
but
groove back?
no, I've actually never seen it. I know of it.
I believe it's her like in a loveless marriage or something like that, and then going on vacation and meeting some hot guy, and then they fuck, and then she gets her groove back. But it like,
That's what I figured as much. It kind of seemed from like, previews and whatnot and the way it's talked about just in general that is, it's like Eat, Pray, Love or whatever, finding
I didn't
yourself,
know that's what that was
becoming
either.
happy. I
But
think that movie's also like, I didn't see that one either. I didn't read the book. I feel like that one's kind of on the same idea of somebody who is in a rut finding themselves by going and eating and praying and loving, so that general idea of figuring out how to get your groove back.
the erotic version is Eat, Pray, Fuck. There you go.
There you go. That was John's version. That's the subtitle to that little 3-issue arc.
Dude, that would have been awesome if he named. I don't think that movie or book was out when this was written, but that would have been an awesome name for this arc.
Yeah,
On the inside is Eat, Pray, Fuck. There you go.
totally.
Anyway, so after John gets his groove back, now we get a fun issue. I like this issue because of there's like historical stuff in it that I thought was funny, and then like this issue just makes me laugh. This is the one where we learn about Coolidge and riding Kubla Khan and how the angels were involved in that, and how John's ancestor was involved in that. What'd you think of this issue?
I hadn't heard that poem story, whatever poem
Oh, I was gonna ask you, are you familiar with that poem?
since high school, honestly. Like, so just hearing its name was like, oh, that takes me back. And I just did not want to hear anymore. I remember we had to you had like 3 different poems that you had to memorize, and that was one of them. And I specifically didn't choose that one because I was reading through it and I was like, oh, this sounds too much. Yeah, I did not choose that one. I think it was that one, Paradise Lost, and what was it, the cavity from Cats or something? I picked that one.
Oh God. Oh God.
It sounded the easiest to remember, and also I love cats, so I was like, sure, that one's a winner.
I should say you love the animal cats, not the play
Yes.
/ movie cats.
No, the play is no, thank you. But I love cats. The animal, definitely. Growing up. So yeah, like as soon as you started, describing it and getting into it, I was like, oh no, is this gonna be like, high school literature class all over again? Thankfully, it wasn't. It was a fun story. I enjoyed learning about a random ancestor of John's who sounds like he's the exact same guy.
It's just
pretty
him.
much.
He just deals drugs
He's
too.
just like a drug lord instead of like magic or whatever. That was pretty funny. I thought the funniest thing about it was that it was like the angels are trying to get him to write this epic because they think that that'll convert more people, and I just thought that plan was so ridiculous.
Yeah, they're just
Oh man,
wasting time, essentially.
such a weird story, but it was funny. It definitely was like a breath of fresh air after that, kind of downer of it. Well, I mean, upper for John of an ending, but it was a fun deviation from that to just have this sort of weird, yeah, history lesson / John and his family are apparently all scoundrels.
Yeah, and I love that. So obviously James Constantine knew kind of what was going on. He saw the angels. He stopped the whole thing from happening. And then at the end, when Coolidge is like, hold on a second, I need to write this down. It's the most epic thing I've ever, imagined. James is like, wait, you have to do this with me first because I need my money. And then that makes him forget most of it. So the poem isn't as good as it should have been, I guess. And then to top it all off, the best part of the comic at the very end is when John was like, hey man, you're like, the tree's all fucked up. And he's like, tree? I was staring at her tits the whole time. That shit just made me laugh so fucking hard when I first read it. It's good stuff.
Yeah, that was fun. And that was his friend. Which friend was that again? That was Rich? I like Rich. He's a weird guy, but he's funny too.
Yeah, just you think he's... I can't remember the exact line that John is thinking about all this heavy stuff. And he's like, oh, what'd you think when she said this? He's like, said something. I was too busy staring at her tits. I didn't hear a damn word she said. Oh man. Yeah, I literally laughed out loud. It's hard for me to deal with literature and stuff, or written word is hard to make you laugh, I think. More so than like Audible, right? Like you're listening to
Oh
someone,
yeah.
you know.
I think hard to make you laugh or cry or sometimes feel any emotions because, well, I don't know. I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, I have sort of a disconnect when I'm reading versus when I'm watching something. I can get into the mindset that something I'm watching, even though it isn't real, like a movie or a TV show, or whatever, isn't real, I can still be in the headspace of it's real in this moment. Whereas when I'm reading, there's still that disconnect of like I'm literally reading something on a page. So it's only as real as it is in my head. And as crazy of an imagination as I have, there's still that it's only in my head. So I very rarely have a connection when I'm reading to anything like emotionally, unless it's something that actually hits me. So I think it's funny that he had this sort of a experience where he's like hearing the story and totally into it, and his friend is just like, "Oh, what? Nah, man, I was just looking at her tits. I didn't like she. What was she saying?" So yeah, that kind of disconnect is pretty funny.
Yeah. Now, I will say I am a fan of that poem. I there's a Rush song called Xanadu that literally has like the wordage, like the actual words from the song or from the poem in it. Um,
Well, that makes sense then.
yeah, and I was like, hell yeah, this is fucking awesome.
Oh, see, there you go. There's the connection.
Yeah,
I didn't have that connection. So to
yeah.
me, I was just like, oh, that's interesting, but also high school literature class, no thank you.
Well,
So
yeah, I can see how that would. I mean, there's shit I read in high school that I'm like, I'd never want to read that again. But I was forced to. But um, yeah,
but of all the things for them to pick a connection to, it's something that you resonate with, which is always nice when that comes along.
exactly. Yeah, and so this issue was kind of like just a breather, I think, in between, this arc and the next one. And the next one doesn't really have like too much to do with John as like I think this is like showing John getting his groove back. Like he is now the old somewhat the old John we knew, right? He's this is where he finds the ghost in the dimension house or whatever, the house that's hidden from the earth or from the world, from people's view, and only he can see it. So I think that's something that like he picked up on because he's got like his mojo back, and then he's able to actually kind of do what old John would do. Now, I don't think it hits as hard because or it hits as hard as it could because we didn't see him like not with his mojo really. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost like he wasn't himself for only what, two, three-ish issues?
Yeah. Well, I guess the one where it affects him the most is when he's in his coma, right?
Right.
But other than that, I mean, there was no big thing where he tries to defeat someone and he can't and he fails because he doesn't have his mojo.
Yeah,
Um,
because he still technically won at the football game, even though someone did die, but he kind of deserved it because he's an asshole.
right.
Um, so even that, like, even if you count that as sort of like a half win, because not everybody died, but then he still had to sacrifice somebody because he couldn't convince the demon to just leave empty-handed. So that's kind of a half win loss, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, but there was no like, oh, this issue is showing that John is completely impotent magically now
Mm.
or whatever. Um, and then this would have kind of made a more of a comeback or an impact, I think, this little story arc, if we had that kind of set up before. Um, which I think you're right. I think 101, which is the football story, is supposed to kind of show that he does half lose. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so like this one, I just thought was kind of like it's a fine story. It's like kind of like your Monster of the Week story. It's not bad. It's not great. It's just okay. Yeah, that's like an interesting arc.
I mean, it's not like it's kind of similar to other stories we've gone through, like with the dog haunting the house, or that one where it was like the plane crash where he got to feel that one guy when he wasn't sure how he felt about living, and then that guy, so it's a similar theme. I think
You're
maybe
going
that's
deep
another
cuts with
reason
that one.
why. It popped in my head and I was like, oh yeah, that one's also similar. Um, but yeah, it's like we've seen this situation happen before, the ghostiness, the hauntingness, the feeling someone else's life. How is it compared to John's? What can he do to help? So yeah, Monster of the Week, very similar with the haunting and, a resolution of sorts. This one didn't quite have the same resolution as all the others where, or like, helping his friend out of his loop when he was stuck in the past with the bicycle and the old soldiers and whatever. Like most of those stories have had some kind of resolution where the ghost is freed or, you know, he gets something big out of it, a new zest for life or something. And this one was more just like, oh, here's a little weird thing that happened and John was a part of it. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. The biggest thing I can think of is we get the introduction of, I think, well, that's not the last friend of John in this run, I think, but like we get the introduction of his friend Weevil, who is a medium that he uses to talk to dead people. And Weevil, the way they draw it, I don't know if I fully described it correctly, in my podcast, but it's so weird how like literally this ectoplasm is like coming out of his mouth and his eyes, and he's like, like as he's talking, as a ghost is talking through him. It's just such like a weird visual, and he's like this big fat guy. He's like comic book guy or something, which is interesting as well. But
I figured it would look the same as any other haunting-y movie where they do the ectoplasm thing where it's like coming out of them and they're like, like I'm your father and I'm okay or whatever. So
yeah, maybe just because he drew it like it'd be like if Slimer
creepy
or something was coming out of his.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can see the difference there because most of the time it's like white or but that probably doesn't look as good on the drawn page.
Yeah, or it looks like something else. So
oozy green stuff is definitely creepier.
Yeah, and I did like how John was like, "Oh, don't you want to talk to Aleister Crowley?" And he's like, "Yeah," and then he like gives him the thing to do it, and he's like, "You didn't tell me he was in hell." After he talked to him, he's like suffering in hell, so he had to feel that. Yeah, that was fun talking as Aleister Crowley again because he's got that Scottish accent that I have to read and figure out how to not be offensive with.
At least it wasn't too long.
Or how to
you
say
did a
it.
good job.
It's hard to not sound like Scrooge McDuck or something when I'm doing his accent.
You know what I did really like though? I thought that the ending was sweet. Although, again, it kind of leaves it open ended. Does it mean that, like the dad kicked him out, and that's why she married the other dude because she just assumed he never came back? Did he come back, and then the dad just didn't approve? So that's why she married another dude. Did he just take too long? And so when he came back, she was already married, and that's why the dad kicked him out. Like it left a few open ended things about like what exactly was the issue there to where he was just like, I can't, like, I'm going to kill myself, but then I'm going to like stick around because I can't move on for some reason. It felt a little empty, I think, a little unanswered questions. And then the end is also a bit ambiguous. Is like, so John makes her forget because for some reason he doesn't want her to realize that her past lover is next door, but he'll still be waiting there for her, and then she'll be surprised all over again when he's like there when she dies. Like I don't know, seemed a little choppy sometimes.
Yeah. Like when I saw, I pretty much figured it out. Like maybe by the beginning of the second issue, I'm like, oh, what? Okay. Like I feel like he wants this. Once we learned about the past with like, oh, he was kicked out of the house and blah blah blah. Like, oh, there's an old couple living next door that we've never met before. That John's like, hey, old timer, remember me? Like, it's good seeing you again, like, and then his wife and everything is like, okay, like they're here for a reason. And then they just happen to be the right age for like, a World War II couple breaking up and stuff. So I kind of like thought that's where it was going, but then it was confirmed, at the end. So yeah, I don't know. This one was fine. It just didn't really do anything for me. Like it wasn't like, oh shit, I know why that's here. It just seemed like, oh, maybe he had this ghost story in his head. He wanted to tell it, and it filled 2 issues. It
was all right, but it wasn't like wowed me or anything.
Yeah, sometimes you got to remember like these are monthly comics, so not every issue is going to be a banger because literally it was like I have to come up with something to print in 30 days. So like,
It was a cute
okay,
story to pass the time and yeah, get us through another point in the story.
right.
And still John, like you said, finding his groove again, getting back into being able to use his abilities again and come up with some sort of a resolution to the story by the end.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it does it does what it needs to, but it doesn't do it like as succinctly or cool or something as I want it to. Um, but yeah, so then that leads into two stories, two one shots that are like very different and very weird.
Yeah.
The 108 is super fucked up. That one is like it deals with a lot of heavy issues, which we haven't really had Jenkins talk about too much in his comics. I mean, obviously you had Boar like killing children and torturing their souls and stuff, but like this deals with like there's a girl who's into gymnastics. She's anorexic or bulimic, and her dad molests her and all this. This is crazy stuff. Like I don't know, like this one also felt like maybe it was told from like most people would start with the story and be told from her point of view, the girl, right? Because she's like the thing that's the most getting the most fucked up stuff happening to it, right? So like, or the storyline is right. So, but we don't. The story actually revolves around like her trainer.
Who's barely in it, which is also just sort of a weird aside to somehow connect these two storylines. That did feel a little forced. It was a little weird.
Yeah, I wasn't sure why we needed her other than to be a character to come in at the end and do what she did.
But even that, it was just like I mean, the house was right next to each other. So did they really need someone who also goes to the party and then also happens to be connected to the girl when the house is literally next door? Couldn't it have just bled over naturally,
Yeah, I guess that's what it was. She had to be to have, I guess, know the family enough so that the connection was there when, how the demon, how, like maybe she had suspicions that stuff was going on. And that's why the, whatever it is, the she of Menwa,
Yeah.
knew to go over there and fuck him up kind of thing. Or that the girl was around. But it seemed like there's thin tethers there.
Yeah, it felt a little weirdly circumstantial, forced almost. And I mean, everything comes from the source of the writer who's coming up with the stories, but sometimes they feel a little more natural and sometimes they don't. And I feel like this was one of those instances where it was a bit of a stretch. It felt a little forced and not quite as naturally occurring,
Yeah.
Almost like the previous story with this couple just happens to live next door to this house that's not there except when it is. And then, oh yeah, they must obviously be part of the story. So yeah, it felt a little weird in that perspective. It was still a super dark, messed up story, but that bit of, I don't know, tenuousness to it also made it kind of weird too.
Yeah, one thing that was interesting in this one is I did voice modifications for the she and he of Mendwa, and
oh, I loved that. That was great.
I was like,
those are always my favorite parts.
yeah, like I don't do that too often, but I was like, I feel like they should have that, and also like, I think I did the same voice and just pitched it up or down depending on which one it was, so it was a little bit easier.
I was
for me.
wondering about that because they sounded so different, yet they still had that same, modulation to it. So I was like, oh.
Yeah, I don't remember.
You still made it sound different.
I don't quite remember what I did because basically after I record these things, I just like completely wipe my mind of it because I only have so much bandwidth. But as far as like the recording time and process of it, but like, yeah, I think I did that. That makes the most sense. Why I would do the modulation instead of having to come up with two different voices, I can just do one voice and then modulate it up and down depending on who's talking. So, but yeah, like this one was. Did you think because of the subject matter, do you think it was handled okay? Like if this came out today, would people be all pissed because you threw in all these like heavy topics and then didn't do the right things or do the things? I mean, it does pay off a bit, on revenge and stuff, but
Yeah, it was a lot of separate issues to tackle in one issue. Like you had both the pushing too hard to be like perfect issue. That's one, horrible thing in itself. And then you have the bulimia and or anorexia. I'm not sure exactly which category she falls into, but one of those of her, body image and uh body dysmorphia. Like you've got that part of it too. And then you've also got the, potential sexual assault as well that could have either just been in that one moment because he happened to be drunk and maybe there was a bit of the influence of the weirdness from the party, or it could have been ongoing. That's not really clear either. Like was
Right.
he always just pushing her too hard and then this third thing comes on top of it because of this one moment? I don't know. It was a lot to tackle in one issue, and I feel like it was almost overboard. Like you could have just picked the first two, and that would have been to me enough to be like, yeah, this guy is a bad dude. But throwing that other thing on top kind of, I guess, makes it so that when his death is revealed, you're not as like shocked that it happened because of all the horrible things that he's done. So, like maybe one or two wasn't enough. They had to throw that third thing in there to make sure that you were okay with him being horribly mutilated at that point, and how she, ends up eating him, I guess, too. So, yeah, it was a lot. And I don't know. I feel like you could still get away with it. There's a lot of weird books that are being written now about all sorts of weird, crazy stuff. So,
That's true.
I mean, I don't know if you've read much modern horror, but there's some weird stuff that's going
Oh
around
yeah,
as far
I
as
read some
like,
of that stuff.
yeah. I mean, I don't dip into the like super extreme stuff, but even what supposedly is considered mainstream now is even tackling some weird stuff. So yeah, I don't say that it would necessarily not be able to be put out today, but it was a little weird to tackle three separate like horrible issues at once when I think one or two could have done the same thing. Like seemed almost overboard.
Yeah, I mainly mean like not that they tackled those certain issues, but that one, it's a single issue, right? So that's like you said, a lot to tackle in it. And like, do you give each one the correct amount of deference that you need, like, to fully explore, or is it okay to just like throw those in and be like, this guy's a fucking bad guy. See, he did all these things, and then when he dies at the end, you're like, yeah, good, fuck that guy. Like, because I think the '90s were like notorious for being like, we want to touch on these issues, but like we also aren't sure where like what we should do with them, and also like comic books might not be quite, or at least like DC comic books might not be quite the vehicle for these heavy topics, depending on what the titles are and whatnot. Now, obviously, the Vertigo titles can go into more of that, but even they can get flippant with some of these things. And like, there's some Swamp Thing, there's some Swamp Thing issues from Volume 3 where like they throw out like a lot of bad words when they're talking about like gay people or things like that. And it's supposed to mean a point, right? It's like supposed to be for a point, but like when it's said, it's like, wow, that just came out of nowhere. Like that's how it feels like, because we were in Swamp Thing stuff, and then now all of a sudden it gets really real, and then never talked about again. So like, I didn't know if maybe that this would not be written for that reason. Like it needs to be given like a 6-issue arc or something if you're going to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a little hard to deconstruct it being only one issue. Obviously, they wanted some shock value in there because maybe the stories before that have been a little on the tame side, and you figure out we got to pump up some viewership. Maybe people are thinking that we're getting soft and not tackling heavy shit anymore. So let's throw in some crazy stuff all at once. It could feel like that a little bit. At the same time, I mean, nothing should really be taboo when you're talking about these sorts of things. It is all fake. It is all just, sort of just imagination, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, he wants to tackle these hard issues, but you want to do it in a way that's also not exploitative, but also like it is there to be shocking. people want to read this stuff to be shocked. And here's a very shocking scenario. So, yeah, I mean, sure, you could take more time to really get into the daughter's perspective. And then where's the mom? Like, where did she go? She just go out shopping when all this stuff happened? Like, she just kind of disappeared.
She was luckily out of the house.
Right? Like, where'd she go?
Or asleep. She missed all of it.
So now she has to come back to all this stuff. Again, another little ending or open-ended part. We'll never find out what happened after that. I doubt. Yeah, I don't know. I think they did what they did to both have that shock value to throw something in that would surprise people and be like, oh, goodness gracious. And then, oh, yeah, and then he dies for his sins. So was it particularly well done and well thought out? Probably not in a single issue. I don't think so. But I also have no qualms about it because they did end up saying, hey, you know what? This was bad. And someone was punished for it. Obviously, the daughter's also going to suffer some like mental scars from what she's done and what she was part of and what has happened. But yeah, it's like I think the beginning of the issue even said that, not everyone comes away undamaged from situations like this where John just kind of inserts himself and there's always what's the word? Fallout or people get hurt even if he doesn't intend it. So yeah, that definitely showed exactly that sort of a scenario.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, I didn't feel like it was disrespectful of those issues personally. Because like it's there to just be like, look how much of a piece of shit the dad is.
Right.
And so it didn't try to like tackle the issues. It just, those issues were in it, and it wasn't like we didn't see too much of what she was going through. I think the thing we saw most was like the dad being super overbearing at practice and stuff like that. But yeah, so then we get the last issue, which is issue 109. It's a werewolf issue, but different kind of werewolves, I think. Like there's the regular one, and then there's some like different ones. So, first off, are you a fan of werewolf stories?
I love werewolf stories, werewolves and vampires, like all the classic monsters. I've loved those topics ever since I got into horror. I'm not a super big horror fan back in the day, but I always loved a good werewolf story or a good vampire story. I don't know if you remember the Goosebumps books, the Werewolf of Fever Swamp, I think that's what it was
I never
called.
read those as a kid.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that was also a weird thing. I used to read those, but for some reason, I still didn't consider myself a horror fan because those I thought were like chilling, they give you goosebumps, but they weren't really like scary. I didn't necessarily get nightmares often from those books, but there was one called The Werewolf of Fever Swamp. Don't ask me everything about it because I can't really remember anymore, but I remember that cover was so striking. It was the coolest classic werewolf, like in this swampy thing, and he's like howling and growling, and I thought that was like such a striking cover. So yeah, loved werewolves and
I gotta interject. I
mermaids.
think that title could also be the title for a modern day erotica. The Werewolf of Beaver Swamp.
No, not beaver, fever.
Oh, I heard Beaver Swamp.
Fever. Sorry, I didn't enunciate that properly, but I can see where your mind goes.
Well, now I know that title is open, so maybe I'll write that someday.
Who knows? Someone probably thought the same thing as you and was like, you know what? I love Goosebumps, but you know what we need? We need beavers.
Yeah, just have a series called like This Ain't Goosebumps, and then
there you go.
A bunch of erotica based on the titles.
Actually, I think there is sort of like a spoof version of it. What was it called? Like Duck Bumps or something like that.
Chicken
like
skin.
They called it something like, I don't know, something like that. It's like a slight parody, but I think there are grosser or, more extreme books or something like that. Anyway, way off topic. Sorry about that. Werewolves. Yes, I do love werewolves. So when this story started, I wasn't expecting it. So it was a fun little aside to realize that this was actually a lycanthropy story. That was very fun. And a different take, because that's always a hard thing to keep it interesting, which is a different take on something that's been done so many times. So yeah, I thought it was really cool. They were almost like caveman werewolves or something that can ride horses and talk.
Yeah, like Planet of the Apes werewolves.
Yeah, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, I liked like I think it was interesting to show like the original kind of werewolf that you expect, and then like halfway through it turns into no, there's these other like that's just a proto version. This he'll grow up and become one of us. We're these like horse riding werewolves that are these kind of fey monsters or fairy monsters, um, or not monsters, but fairy creatures that are from like the lands similar to Abaton or Abaton adjacent or whatever. Um, and I mean, this honestly, the last two issues of this 108 and 109 were just kind of set up for what's going to happen in the next arc, which I've read, and it's like they even say it in these issues where it's like something is coming, the worlds are crossing, like our world is crossing into yours because you're hurting our world, we're going to be like attacking you, kind of thing. So beware, human. And yeah, like what do you think about like that, like werewolves being like that kind of a creature?
Oh, I thought that was so much fun. I always love like seeing a favorite sort of monster cryptid creature, but in a new sort of way. Someone takes their own idea and twists it just a little bit. So it's not, not everything can be the, werewolf from Van Helsing where it's a super classic werewolf or whatever,
Van Helsing.
which is great. I love that movie because it has both the
That's your
classic
go-to
werewolf
werewolf.
and the classic vampire. Oh yeah, totally. Like that is right there, like classic, chef's kiss, perfect adaptation of it being exactly the way the classics should be, creepy vampire Dracula, whatever. So this was a fun uh side from that where you have the idea of a classic werewolf, but also these, original immortal wolf creatures that have the ability to make more of themselves and also but also to like retain their humanity in a way, I guess, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was fun.
And I liked that.
And it was like a good introduction to what comes next, even though we didn't, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen next and the listeners don't. But yeah, the like, I think it's a good introduction leading into that. So, I think it was a strong like story to like leave at where it's like, oh, that's kind of cool and interesting. And then we get the next issue. So speaking of the next issues, the next episode is going to be issues 110 to 117, I believe. And so it's going to be, I think it's just, I guess it's just 7 issues, but it's, or maybe 8 issues. Yeah, it's 8 issues. So, that'll be, it'll be good. I think it'll be a fun, that one's definitely more cohesive than this little section we had. But,
Not as chopped up. We get a nice long storyline of things happening.
exactly. Yeah. So that'll be fun to
Nice.
talk about next time. And, yeah, was there anything I missed or anything you wanted to go over?
Well, did you have a favorite cover of this batch?
Yeah, I really liked. I mean, the one with Ellie and like where he's sweeping Ellie back on the cover and they're standing in hell is pretty sick. I like that one a lot.
It's almost like the classic romance novel cover,
Yes,
except it's John instead of Fabio.
it's John, and also if you've read it, you know what it is. So so it makes it funny. But yeah, what about you?
Oh, I really liked the one where the angel's bound on the front cover. That to me has sort of like a classic look to it. It reminds me of a lot of those like early ones where John's face was like sort of like smeared or something. Almost like the first issue, even that weird sort of like aura to it. I really like that one. That one's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. That does really have a reminiscent or a feel that is reminiscent of the covers from the first Jamie Delano arc for sure. Um,
Yeah. Oh, you know what was also fun is the one with the first of the three arc. I think that was 10.
the coin toss one, 102.
Oh no, sorry. 103, the one with the worm guy.
Oh yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
So that one I really liked because it had like the perfect breakup of like of artistically like a foreground, a middle ground, and a background because you had the wormy skeleton in the front, and you had John sort of in the midground, and then like behind him was that little sort of town thing in the background. I thought that was like a really gorgeous setup, um, just of a classic like plane of you know foreground,
Vision or
middle, and
whatever.
background.
Yeah.
So that one, yeah, just like the visual of that was very pleasing to look at structurally.
Yeah.
Not like super crazy as far as like anything else, but I thought it was a really pretty picture, you know? It was like almost a classic seascape, I guess, but with a creepy body and worms and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That one's cool. I mean, I can't get over what happens in issue 104. So,
Yeah.
but what about, did you have a favorite issue?
Ooh, that's actually a hard one because I mean, I lean towards the werewolf one just because it's a great end cap and it is one of my favorite monsters. I don't know. I think that one's my favorite. Yeah, I think I have to go with that one being my favorite just because it was such a fun story.
Yeah. Well, it's got werewolves. You like werewolves, so.
Hmm.
I loved 105, which is the Kubla Khan one. I love that
Of
issue.
course.
It makes me laugh.
I mean, the way you talked about it, I kind of figured it would be your favorite.
I love it. One, like I said, I'm a fan of the poem. I'm a fan of the Rush song. It was fun to see the history of it. It was fun to see John be like a drug dealer or his relative. It was fun to see John and Rich do like their crazy tree trimming business. And then it was fun for Rich to be like, I was just staring at her tits. So like it hit all the things that are fun in a single issue for me. So
It did have a lot of really great, and it was almost sort of kooky, sort of like I don't know, almost like the comedy issue in a way.
Yeah.
So,
what are these two
that
kids
was,
up to?
yeah, that was a very different feel in general. Just considering where this art goes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, anything else?
No, I think that's all I can think of. This was a lot of fun though. I really enjoyed the breakup of this one into smaller chunks, digestible chunks, as opposed to a big storyline. But I think from what you've hinted, we're in the calm before the storm before we get into a really heavy, bigger section. So I'm excited to see what comes next.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about it. So, yeah, with that being said, if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains.and-comic-books, all one word, @gmail.com. And with that, we'll see you guys on the next one.
See you later.
Bye.